Caitlin. Oh, I love seeing faces I know. Hello, everyone. Wonderful. Well, we'll let people trickle in here, but as you trickle in, just want to remind you, if you could please rename yourself with your preferred name, your pronouns, and your organization. And if you feel like it, introduce yourself in the chat. We do encourage you to be on screen today, as we'll have a couple of workshops together, and this is really your space for peer learning. So if you feel comfortable, please do so. If not, I totally understand. But we'll move right into the practice today. All right, so welcome to our community practice. This is Greenlink Analytics space where we connect leaders from across the country that are advancing environmental and social equity to learn about topics that improve our work through peer-to-peer conversations and data literacy. For those of you who are new to Greenlink Analytics, we are an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization, but we are scattered throughout the nation. We have some people in Chicago, Texas, Ohio, and we are comprised of energy and equity researchers working together to advance a clean energy transition as fast and as fair as possible. Who you're seeing today, Shirani Madhavan, Samantha Hook and Daniel Wagner and myself are part of the Greenlink's Equity Team, where we oversee our internal and external equity and community initiatives here. We'll get into our platform today, but each of our teams within Greenlink Analytics has tools that we use for our work. And the tool that our team uses the most is our Greenlink Equity Map, or what we like to call GEM, which is a visualization tool created to make data easily accessible to everyone. And it is currently used by 60 cities and 93 community-based organizations and has over 650 active members right now. So we'll talk more about what GEM is, and you'll actually have an opportunity to get in the platform and to play with it today. But without further ado, we'll jump right into today. So what we're going to cover within our time, we're going to talk about what is data storytelling, which is our main theme for today. And then we're going to walk through the foundations of data storytelling. Then we're going to go into an independent workshop where we're going to ask you to kind of reflect on the narrative of your neighborhood while using the GEM tool. So we'll get in there together. We'll review some case studies that Greenlink has undergone that show good examples of data storytelling, and also talk about some lessons learned. And then we'll go into a group breakout session where we'll work together to actually use the foundations of data storytelling and our map to create a narrative of a community that we're working with and provide some actionable insights from that. Then we'll wrap it all up in a bow with a Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Shar.
All right. Hi, everybody. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Shar. And I'm going to just start off today with describing data storytelling and kind of our approach to it. So when we talk about data storytelling, we mean analyzing and translating complicated information into accessible narratives and visualizations that more easily inspire action and decision making. So when we talk about translation of data, this depends a lot on the context of the audience you are speaking to, and it's important to ensure that contextualizing the analysis does not always lead to a biased interpretation or manipulation of data. It's really easy to approach a data set or a problem with preconceived notions of what you think might be happening before even looking at the data. So that's very important. Today, we are going to go through the foundations of data storytelling like Jelly mentioned. And these are going to outline the different parts necessary to go ahead and craft a narrative around complex information that we call data. So the first approach to data storytelling that we're going to highlight today is non-binary lenses. So when we talk about non-binary lenses, we're basically referring to looking beyond the relationship between just two factors or circumstances. Data is binary, meaning that it's comprised of ones and zeros. Either something might be true or it might be false. But there's so much more to the world than and solving problems than that. there's this whole human element that often gets overlooked in data analysis. So it's very easy to equate data to actual lived experiences, but it never tells the whole story. There's a lot of limitations to data, as you all might know. Some examples might be granularity. If we're looking at, averages, that's obviously not telling the whole story of what's happening on the ground. So data is very important to crafting these narratives and getting the conversation started. It might be very important in kind of informing community engagement, which we're going to talk about later in the presentation. But it's really important to pair this with that lived experience to understand what's actually happening on the ground. So non-binary lenses keep the human aspect front and center. Data can sometimes paint a cold picture, whereas non-binary storytelling warms and humanizes the situation. So it's really important as a fundamental to data storytelling.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. So I'm going to continue this conversation. After or while testing that your data is accurate and running analysis, speaking with communities you're working with, ensuring that there is this non-binary lens centering the human aspect with your results, the next step is taking the results and making them accessible to communities, as well as using the information to propel action or policy changes by creating accessible communication. So when communicating about data and sharing the full picture, you're going to use different language when speaking to different audiences for communicating the data, progress, or results. For funders or policy work, language will generally be more academic and rigid, following along legal jargon to support changes with good scientific evidence, the qualitative and or quantitative data on why changes need to be made, and how said changes will benefit these communities. So this is communicating the data into formal narratives that make sense of communities' needs for funders or potentially making changes at the policy level. For communities, the same good science needs to be used. However, in communicating projects, progress, or results, you're going to use language that will make sense to the community you're working with. So use less academic or formal language and more common language. In some cases, you may need to hire translators for communicating with the community on what has been discovered from the qualitative and or quantitative data and what has been found to be the best actions to support or heal the community and meet the needs. To do this, it's important to identify community resources and practice respectful people-first language while sharing information on the results and action plans with the data for the current and future efforts to support community needs. And just really quick, I want to emphasize that people-first language is a reminder to put the person, the humanizing aspect we were talking about, first, and make the material digestible for the people you're speaking with. Now, next slide. We're going to talk about intersectional approaches. And this is a framework for understanding the interconnected nature of social constructs such as gender, religion, race, etc., and how they influence an individual or community's varying experiences with privilege and or discrimination. So in the graphic here, you can see an example showing some of the different social constructs that can make up an individual or community. These are not all the possibilities, but each of these circles represents one of those individual social constructs. So we're seeing religion, gender, race, income, or class, and then how they are overlaid makes up that individual or community and how they are perceived or identified in the world that can be influencing their experience. So that overlapping is the intersectionality of a person or the community. The next slide, please. So in keeping with the human aspect, it's important to use the people first language and use an intersectional approach to create a narrative by weaving a mosaic, collaging of elements of stories together to reveal a fuller picture, which Jelly is going to go more in depth into.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sammy. Yeah, some key important things that Sammy and Shar have uplifted really set us up for how we bring these things to life. And one of those ways we do that is making sure that we're taking interdisciplinary methods to our work and to our storytelling. And so just as an example, Greenlink Analytics is comprised of 3 teams: our data science team, our analyst team, our public policy team, and then our equity initiatives community team here. And we all work together to make sure that we are informing and streamlining all of what the data says and what the community says, and making sure that there is a consistent feedback loop between the informant, the data, the action or context, the policy, and then the equity indicators within that also informs better data collection, stronger engagement methods that ground truth that data. So as we take intersectional approaches and we start to understand the elements that contribute to a person's experience or a group's experience, we start to understand the deeper how these very complex issues require very dynamic partnerships to work. And we're going to share a couple of examples of what those partnerships look like in some of our external work streams later on when we discuss our case studies. So another thing that I want to stress that Sammy uplifted, and Shar uplifted, was the importance of ground truthing. Ground truthing is our word for really robust community engagement that confirms or denies some of what the data is telling us, and making sure that we are accounting for not just the numbers, but the actual narratives and stories of the community, and being able to combine those in a meaningful way that leads to action. So data itself can tell us what is going on, or we can look at the relationships between things, but it cannot tell us why or how the degree of that relationship. And so the stories of lived experiences should be coupled with data analysis so that we can start to answer those questions or approach answering the questions of how and why a phenomenon is happening with a particular group or individual. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So with that in mind, we see ground truthing working as like a checks and balances to data analysis, right? So even though data says one thing, the community may say another, and it's always good to have a feedback loop between the two so we're capturing the full picture. So we're actually going to take a break from talking at you, and I'm going to pass it over to Daniel because we're going to get into the Equity Map platform so that we can go into an independent workshop here in a second. So I'll pass it over to you, Daniel.
All right. Howdy, y'all. This is, our logins and such. If you'll go to gem.equitymap.org, and then you can log in with data stories at greenlinkanalytics.org. And then our password is good data stewards 23 ! And the G, D, and S are capitalized for that. And what we're going to kind of talk about is what is the story of your city or community? Every place has its own unique idea or situation, problems, and good. Does data support what you see on the ground? Does it actually correlate with what you're experiencing? Sometimes we see this with the CGES tool, where an area or a census tract could say it's disadvantaged when in actuality it's not as disadvantaged as one that's next to it. It isn't necessarily telling a whole story of the area. So yeah, that's kind of one pen and paper, jot down a little bit about, where you live, where you're working, those communities. And, while looking at that area within GEM, is that data supporting what you're actually seeing? And we'll take a few minutes here for y'all to look at it and continue after that.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. If any of you have trouble getting into the platform, feel free to let us know. You can come off mute or you can let us know in the chat. But I put all the information in the chat, so you should be able to copy and paste that there. But like Daniel said, feel free to take this time independently. You can write it down, take some notes on your notebook to really just explore GEM right now and start to understand what the narrative is of your neighborhood that you grew up in. So we'll give you a few minutes for that, and then I'll reconvene.
That can be reached. You went to gem.equitymap.org, right, Rosa?
Guys, you guys finish up writing down some of those thoughts here, some of your observations as you're exploring GEM. But we're going to keep those to ourselves. We'll have an opportunity to bring those forward to the group and discuss them in our breakout sessions later on. So feel free to wrap those up now. And what we're going to do now is going to talk about a couple of case studies in which we have used the foundations of data storytelling within our work, so we can start to think about what this looks like in real time, and then we'll go into our breakout sessions. So keep your notes handy and at the forefront of your mind. I'm going to pass it to Shar to talk about our work with the city of Albuquerque.
All right, so we're going to start off with the City of Albuquerque project, which is actually currently underway and Greenlink is a part of. So this is a great project, or a great example of a project that is very interdisciplinary. There's many stakeholders to this project, including the community and the city, as well as Greenlink and another firm. So we have the Office of Environmental Health at the city that's involved, the Air Quality Control Board, which is comprised of community members and focuses on reducing air pollution under the New Mexico Air Quality Control Act, Hummingbird, which is a consulting firm helping with community and stakeholder engagement, and then Greenlink, which is the data arm for the project. So the purpose of the project is to basically equip the city and the community with a compelling narrative that supports their community petition, which will then allow for the Air Board to address health, environmental, and equity impacts on Bernalillo residents, especially those living in heavily burdened communities impacted by air pollution. So as you can kind of tell by that description, it's a very complex problem, especially one that includes many different stakeholders. So it has the base of data to inform this project, but there's so many other components to it as well. So Greenlink, as a part of the data arm of this project, was able to provide a community-driven map in an intersectional data analysis. And then this initial data informed the engagement process that Hummingbird was able to lead. But this was an extremely iterative process. So the findings from the engagement were then fed back into the Greenlink models and data analysis to make it that much stronger. And especially, it's important to note that the city was at the table throughout this whole process as well. So they were helping us figure out how to contextualize this narrative in a way that supported the community petition, or supports. It's currently happening. So in this case, there was a focus on the intersection of air quality and communities facing the highest burdens in the community. So it was very very intersectional, but also had this whole piece of looking at the interdisciplinary elements, as well as the non-binary lenses. So it basically brought together all these fundamentals that we've talked about today. And it's a great example of data storytelling that Greenlink has been able to be a part of.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Shar, for that. And because the project is still ongoing, we have not hit the milestone in which we are actually translating this data into some more actionable insights that's going to support the community petition. But that is an essential part of our work, is not to just provide the data analysis, but actually communicate with Hummingbird on what that means and what actions the city can take that are adjacent in their programming and servicing around the community petition as well. So that stay tuned, follow our work with that. Something I would like to share with you, another example I would like to share with you, is the pilot project that we did and with the city of Atlanta regarding an Atlanta Equity Index. An equity index is a local community-driven and co-creation process that we stewarded, supported with the Clean Energy Advisory Board with Atlanta, which is comprised of residents from the neighborhood planning units in Atlanta, especially those in areas that are most energy burdened. The West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, which is a local nonprofit organization and a strong partner of ours, and Sustainable Community Solutions, which is the consultant intermediary that helped build upon the community engagement and capacity building within the community. Our role as technical assistants and kind of the community initiatives lead was to work with Wawa and Sustainable Community Solutions to co-create a local equity index within our GIM platform, which we can show today, using mixed data methods. So we were both doing the quantitative aspect of what the map was already sharing with us around the data in the community, as well with qualitative analysis, using interview processes and questionnaires and community organizing practices to understand the lived experiences of the community and making sure that it was aligned with some of what the original data was pointing to in the map. So Wawa and SCS was responsible for ground truthing this data. So being part of the deploying the questionnaires and the interviews and the qualitative workshops that we had with the community and the Clean Energy Advisory Board, so that the data and the priorities within the data accurately reflected the experiences of the residents, specifically in the NPUs that were facing the highest energy burden. So we used all of these insights and we actually synthesized the qualitative data into the GIM map itself. So the local equity index is accurately reflective of all of the questionnaires and interviews that we took from over 200 residents within the Atlanta area and is reflective in the map itself. So it makes it a little bit unique. And then we worked with the Clean Energy Advisory Board to present to the city. And at this time, it was to the Office of Sustainability, where Chandra Farley is now within that office. And so she helped us present this joint meeting with other departments to better advocate around some of the Clean Energy Advisory Board's plans to reduce energy burden and other health inequities within their communities. And so we were able to present to them their top 5 priorities that were both backed by data and backed by lived experiences. And some of those were alleviation of energy burden, alleviation of housing burdens, alleviation of high asthma rates, and then other things like income stress and heat index, I think. There's something at the top. Don't quote me that. We'll go to the research. But yeah, so this was also, as Shar mentioned, a really strong example of using these interdisciplinary partners to come along board, build capacity, both intellectual, relational, financial, with the community to help serve a community agenda using data and also looking at the entirety of the picture together. So I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that lessons that we've learned through these case studies and many of the work that we have done in the past, because as Shar and Samantha had mentioned before, there are a lot of limitations and gaps within data itself. And as good data stewards, it's really important to know what these are before going into creating any analysis or working with the numbers, so that we don't use the numbers to point to the picture, but really just trying to understand what they are telling us. And so there are a lot of gaps in data, and a lot of this comes from, well, it comes from many different things, just capacity nationally of what we're able to collect, and also, you know, intellectual property, things like HIPAA that protect the rights of community in which we are not able to get certain data things, and rightfully so, but also in the way that data is collected as well. For example, an example we often use is the way that census data currently collects like racial demographics as not necessarily reflective or accurate of a lot of the different ethnic backgrounds that communities identify with. And so there's still a lot of information missing, and also just in reporting in the certain data spaces, such as mental health reporting has been one where there's a lot of gaps in that data just because there hasn't been a lot of strong data to lean on in the field. So missing data, gaps in data, poor data collection. And there's also one thing we talk about a lot is the manipulation of data. So using data as can be used as a weapon, or the omission of certain data could also be used as a weapon. And we've seen that a lot within our work, working with governments and CBO partners, in which some of the data, if seen from a binary lens, as we mentioned before, can say that this equals 1 + 1 = 2, and really there's many factors that go into that one that we want to be able to express within our work. And so it's a really big principle for us to make sure we are trying to bring the data as accurate as possible, bring forth the most accurate data as possible, and not trying to manipulate the numbers or the interpretation of what the data is saying. There's also things within this work around data disparity. So who are the people most often in the data sciences who get their hands on the data, who have the first glance at interpreting the data, and a lot of that being not evenly distributed across certain genders or racial groups within the field. So that plays in part, especially into who has ownership of the data and who gets to have a say in what the data is saying to the community. So something along those lines, and the last point I will make here is around data sovereignty. So when we're working with a lot of communities and the data, wanting to make sure that we're collecting data, we're interpreting data, and we're ground truthing data in a way that is non-extractive, needing to have conversations about who owns and maintains the data, and especially when that data is comprised of communities' lived experiences. So those are a couple of things that we're both still growing and learning about, and we know that are the limitations of the work that we do that we wanted to bring forward, because this, being aware of it, helps us better troubleshoot in advance of how we can work with this and around some of these things. And then my team has anything to add on some of the lessons learned here, please feel free to speak up if you would like. But yeah, lots of things here. Okay. Before we move on to the breakout rooms, are there any questions that we have thus far? I know we've thrown a lot of information at you all, and then we'll get together in just a second, but we're a little ahead of schedule, so I thought I'd throw that out there.
I guess really quick, while people are thinking about questions, Jelly, with the lessons learned, a lot of these play into each other too. So like data gaps is like a really important overarching term where missing data, manipulation, misinterpretation, poor data collection all play a part that affect in a lot of different ways. And I think the lessons learned, it's also important to be aware of maybe where the data gaps are in your collection with the data. So because we have to use the data that's available to us as those who work in data and trying to make changes. And so if we're able to identify and be aware of what some of those gaps might be in the quantitative data that we have, we can go out and do qualitative research and speaking with community that can maybe help alleviate some of those gaps for the work that we're doing. Just to add in on that.
Yeah, thank you, Sammy. That's an important point there as well. Any questions, or we want to talk to other people in the group? All right. All right. So what we're going to do now is you'll have time to ask questions again at the end. So don't feel free, you have to speak up, or don't feel pressured to speak up now. But we are going to go into breakout groups in which we are going to actually work together. So we'll go into about 2 breakout rooms since we have a small crowd today. we're going to work together to craft a narrative about the community that you were just looking at within your independent workshops and translating those into some actionable insights using the foundations of data storytelling that we mentioned today and using the Greenlink Equity Map. And so Daniel's going to cue these breakout rooms, and we're going to divide up in there and kind of get a little focus work, bringing in our own expertise and our work experience, and then start to craft and interpret some of the information that the data is telling us. Wow.
I just shared a link that I was going to share in my group. Sorry, I didn't get to finish, but here you guys go. It's interesting.
No, you're good. We're actually a little bit above schedule. So if we want to, and since we have a smaller group, do we want to share out a little bit of what we were discussing or any parts of that were just getting juicy in our conversations that we want to share with this group of what they were seeing, that the data was saying versus what they know what's going on in their neighborhoods or communities they're working with? The brave, safe space if anybody wants to talk. Sorry, Daniel, Sammy, anything from your guys' groups?
I would say for me, with the idea of data telling the story in Cleveland, Ohio, it actually kind of does. The data backs up the problems in East Cleveland, which is one of the poorest areas of the country. Very much abject poverty, people with $20,000 median incomes. And that's good because when there's a big push within the city to do more work in East Cleveland because it was just forgotten under the last administration. They did nothing for 20 years to help them out. That when you go to the city council or you're presenting on why you need it, there is actual data to back up the story and the people's problems that exist there.
Did anybody else have a similar experience when they were looking at the data? It also brings a question to mind, but we'll hold that. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, same experience. And yeah, I guess the the challenge is like, I don't know, the power of data and who's using it. And so when you see so much concentrated inequity in 1, 2, 3 census tracts right next to each other, and it's by race and ethnicity, and it's so compounded. Just like, what if the solutions are focused on like built environment and policy as opposed to building community power, then I feel like the solutions just contribute to further displacement. And so I was just trying to imagine using the data with the community organizing groups, and like, is it powerful to see, oh, what we already know demonstrated in the map, and how do we best use that to further the organizing goals? Those are some of the questions kind of coming up for me. But yeah, very much with the data as a reflection of what folks are experiencing in the community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Those are some of those deeper conversations I'm excited to get into. Always here for that too. I think one of the things that you also said when we were in our little groups was to see it was really powerful. Like, you knew it, and I think you called the area of Salinas was the lettuce curtain, right? And so Rosa had expressed that the more inland was more of the non-white communities, Latinx communities, farm workers, and then you had a lot of white communities that were on the coast, which are rents, I imagine, are a lot higher, that are all along the coast there as well. But to actually see it, the visualization, right? And that's a huge component to data storytelling. It's not just like resulting in the numbers and looking at the numbers, but actually having a visualization of what is going on. And I was wondering during our discussion as we were getting into the juice and we had to come back here, is like, at what point are we bring in information that the community already knows that in a way that's going to be more uplifting and as a tool to equip them to advocate amongst themselves versus just kind of rubbing in what they already know? And how do we approach that, you know, and then help them carve that narrative in a way that helps share or back up their agenda? And it would also talk about around organizing. Reason I love it when it has been used for organizing is because usually organizing is action oriented, and that's the intent of it. And so there is in this non-extractive component about it, like we are going to do something with this information, and we are going to build community capacity and power around it. Yeah, I'm, you know, in my work, I still figuring out how to balance that. And of course, all of us, we work nationally a lot of times too, so having to understand the context of each community that we're working in is a big thing too. Any other thoughts or reflections before we close out? Okay. Everyone wants to eat lunch. I understand. Okay, well, I will then pass it over to Daniel to close us out. Just say thank you and to give you some information on how to follow up with us if you want to continue these conversations and or find out more about the work that we do.
Yeah. So thank y'all. Thank you for the adventure. We very much would like to thank our partners, T-Tech, who help us build GEM, Upright Consulting, which Mina is a part of. They're a great thought partner, and our leadership committee within GEM that helps us make it. Feel free to reach out. Conversations are awesome. And this work that y'all do is so awesome and important. We love to discuss it more and more and more. Thanks. We'll see you next month.
All right. We hope to hear from you all again and see you. But thank you again. Happy Thursday.